guys, welcome back to Food Prep Guide. Today we are going to be baking bread. I need to start my meal prep for the month, getting a bunch of loaves of bread in the freezer, and we're going to use our bread machine to help make that happen. We're not going to be making sourdough today, but that video is coming. You can make sourdough loaf in your bread machine with just the push of a button. That's awesome. Today I'm going to be focusing on just your traditional sandwich bread. The first method that I'm going to show is the method that lets the bread maker do everything. Push a couple buttons, walk away for about 3.5 to 4 hours, and come back to freshly baked bread. The second method that I will show is letting the bread machine knead our dough and proof it, rise it, but then letting us actually do the baking, because I want to use my Pullman loaf pan. I don't have my lid, but I have my lid over here. It has a lid that goes here and allows us to get a very long, narrow, and rectangular shape of sandwich bread, just like you get at the grocery store. That seems to be our favorite for when it comes to sandwich bread. And the loaf that we are going to be making in here, we are going to be turning into garlic bread because we use that a lot with our supper meals. So if that interests you, let's get started.
By the way, if you would like help building your food storage, scroll down to the description box of this video and click this link for our free 1-year food storage plan. We calculated a year's supply of food for one person, then broke that data down into a week-by-week list of items to build your pantry on a budget. We'll send it straight to your inbox. If you're new here, we invite you to subscribe and hit the notification bell so you don't miss all of our upcoming food preservation, pantry storage, and gardening tutorials. Now back to the kitchen.
Okay, here is my pan. This model has a double paddle, and it makes a 3-pound loaf, but you can also go down and do a 2-pound or a 2.5 pound. I think you can also do a 1.5 pound. But I have a family of 5 and I don't want to be baking bread every single day, so I opted for the 3-pound model. So to start, whenever you are making bread in a bread machine, you always put the liquid ingredients in first. So to start, we need 2 cups of water, and this is for the 3-pound loaf. Where's my water? Here it is. I've already measured out 2 cups. This is 2 cups of water. And to that, we'll add 5 tablespoons of butter. Your butter does not need to be melted or softened. In fact, this came out of the freezer. Apparently, I didn't have any in the fridge. I just pulled this out of the freezer. So I'm just going to cut it up into chunks. I'm not measuring or anything, just cut it up into chunks and put them in there. Okay, so after the butter, we need 3 teaspoons of salt. You always want to put your salt in after the liquid and then let your yeast go in last, because you don't want that yeast to come into contact with the salt. So we have 3 teaspoons of salt. Remember, this is making a 3-pound loaf, which is pretty huge. So if these ingredients seem a little larger than normal, that's why. So next is our flour. We need 6 cups of flour. The recipe calls for bread flour. I don't stock multiple types of flour in my house. I only stock and use all-purpose. I have made this bread recipe before and it turns out just fine. So 6 cups of bread flour if you want, or all-purpose flour as I'm using here. And now I believe it's our sugar. You can also use honey. I'm going to use 5 tablespoons of sugar. Sometimes I choose to do a 1/4 cup of honey instead. Today I'm using sugar, 5 tablespoons. 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. And to that we will add our yeast, which is our last ingredient, and we need 2.5 teaspoons for this 3-pound loaf. I'm just going to make a little well kind of in the center real quick. That's not absolutely necessary, but that's how I've been doing it, so may as well continue doing it that way because I know it works. So 2.5 teaspoons. I'm not going to do any mixing. I'm going to put it in just like this. Here's a quick top view for you, so you can see that little well that I made for the yeast. Notice that I'm not doing any mixing. The bread machine will take care of that for me. So I'm just going to sit this in here, and I will say this is the only part of this bread machine that has been tricky for me. There's these little, I don't want to dump the thing over, but there's these the turners of the paddles, and they have to go into this thing just right, but You don't have to line it up. You just press and the paddles will turn until it clicks. And I have found that it feels like I'm gonna break it, which, you know, it just feels like I have to push a little bit too hard, but that's, you know, how it works. That's what the manual says, so that's how I've been doing it. Okay, it clicked. I'm gonna pull up on the pan just a little bit to make sure that it's in place, and if I can pull up and it doesn't snap up, then it's good to go. So for this first loaf, I'm going to use the method where we just let the machine knead for us. So I'm going to use the dough cycle, which is number 6. So I need to go to the number 6 setting and hit start. And as you can see, it will take approximately 1 hour and 15 minutes before we will be able to move on to the next step. Our bread machine just went off, so now we are going to prepare my loaf pan. Remember, the first round that we're doing is just letting this do the dough, but we're going to actually bake it in the oven. I don't know if I remember mentioning this, but the whole reason I do this is because doing it this way, as long as I get started early enough in the mornings, I can get 4 loaves of bread done in one day. I can repeat this dough cycle once and then bake a complete loaf of bread in here once, and then do that again to get 2 loaves of oven baked bread and 2 loaves of bread maker bread for 4 loaves total at the end of the day. It's the whole reason I'm doing this, in case anyone was wondering. So here's my Pullman loaf pan. I'm just going to butter it up, get that nice and greased. I love this pan, y'all. It works excellent. You'll see the lid, and when we go to bake it, you'll see the lid. And it just helps produce basically exactly the type of loaf you get at the store. I highly recommend it. I'll have it linked down in the description box if you're interested. Okay, let's see how this dough looks. Nice and poofy. Here it is. I'm going to lightly dust my surface just so I can shape the dough just a little bit to get it nice into this loaf pan. Get a good shape on it. Sometimes the paddles come off inside the dough, so just be looking on for that. It's very common. In fact, the bread maker comes with, and I'm pretty sure all of them come with a tool to help you pull the paddles out. They didn't come out on this one, but sometimes they do. But there's like it comes with a little hook tool that helps you get it out if it does get stuck in there. Man, this feels so nice. This is beautifully proofed dough. I am not super concerned about how my bread looks. I'm just trying to get it into a long, skinny rectangle shape to fill out my loaf pan good. I'm not concerned about anything other than that, really. Okay, there we go. Put this into the pan. And we are going to let this rise for another hour. I already have my oven light on. It's been on for several hours now because I'm trying to reactivate my sourdough starter. So I'm going to go ahead and put this in the oven with the oven light on for at least an hour. It may need to go for an hour and a half, but we're just going for it to almost double in size, not quite. Okay, so we just set that dough into the oven with the oven light on to rise for another hour. Whoops, I didn't set my timer. Let me do that real quick. Don't want to forget that. Okay. And so now we're going to move on to the second loaf that we're going to let the bread maker do from start to finish. I'm trying to give you all a little peek behind the scenes at the workflow because it's kind of important to producing as many bread loaves as possible. So while that is proofing, we will start the dough for my second batch. I am using literally the exact same recipe, so I'm not even worried about washing out the dough pan. I'm just moving forward. So again, liquids at the bottom, we're going to do the exact same recipe, and it's really interesting. You'll see how very different the loaves of bread turn out between the bread machine and the oven. I think that would be fun. That's one of the reasons why I wanted to do this video with both recipes in one video, because I think it's fun to see a side-by-side difference so that you can judge which method might be best for you. So that was 2 cups of water. Now we're going to do our 5 tablespoons of butter. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. After that, we'll do our 3 teaspoons of salt. This is going to be another 3-pound loaf. 2 and 3. And to that, we'll add 6 cups of all-purpose flour or bread flour. Not worrying about mixing, we'll let the machine do that for us. Next is 5 tablespoons of either sugar or honey. I'm using sugar today. 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. I always have to count out loud or I'll lose my where I am. Okay, to that we will add the yeast, 2½ teaspoons of yeast. Always forget to make a little well in the middle. Let me do that real quick. Okay, 1, 2, and 1/2. And that is it. Now this time we're going to use a different setting because we are cooking the entire bread from start to finish in the bread maker. So let me get that set up. Okay, let's turn it on. So this time we are just doing the basic loaf of bread, so it's going to stay on 1. I'm going to use the second dark, and we're going to do the 1,500 pound, or gram, 1,500 pound, 1,500 gram loaf of bread. And that is done. We have our bread size, our crust color, and start. You can lift this up and look. It doesn't interfere with the function of it at all. It's kind of cool to watch it sometimes. So at this point, you can see the first time that we did the dough, it was at 1 hour and, what was it, 40 minutes, 50 minutes? You'll see that this is 3 hours and 15 minutes, so it takes approximately 3 hours and 15 minutes to go from start to finish when you let the bread machine do all of it. I will show you the results of both bread loaves in just a bit. Okay, our bread is done rising, and as you can see, it has certainly doubled in size. And I'm going to put the lid on. And if you've never used a Pullman loaf pan before, one of the benefits to having a lid is you can see how it rises more in the center, and I think that's pretty much typical of sandwich loaves bread. It's kind of rises in the center and tapers down towards the ends, and what that lid does is it kind of forces that middle part to flatten out and squish out a little bit to get a really nice rectangular loaf. It's not going to be perfect by any means, but it does help. So here's the lid. It just slides on right onto the pan like this. Whoops, about to trip over my pan down here. Just like that. I have been preheating my oven for 350 degrees. I'm going to put this in for 30 minutes and then test the temperature and see if it needs to go in longer. It might need to go in longer, but we're going to start with 30 minutes. Okay, the timer went off. Let's see how it looks. It's looking good, but it looks undone. I'm going to test it just to see. Bread is typically done when it has an internal temperature of 190 degrees Fahrenheit. Going a little bit deeper, 163. So yes, we are not done yet. So I'm going to put this in for, let's see, how about 10 minutes? That should do it. Okay, 10 more minutes. Let's see where we are now. That looks good. I bet that's done. Let's test it. Needs to be somewhere around 190 degrees Fahrenheit. There we go. Perfect. Okay, so I'm going to take this lid off so that it doesn't continue baking too much. Otherwise, I'll just set it there and let it cool off. You can see how that lid flattened it nice. It's still down on this side, but like I said, it won't be perfect. Let me turn that off. And over here with our bread maker, we have 1 hour and 30 minutes left on the bread maker loaf. I'll show you a side by side in just a minute. Okay, our bread machine is done. So let's take that out. Beautiful. Oops, here it is. We'll plop that out and put it side by side with the oven baked bread. Okay, here is the finished product, the 2 loaves side by side. We have the one that was baked in the oven in the Pullman loaf pan. You can see it's a lot longer. And then the one in the bread maker is a little bit taller, certainly more rounded and shorter. I just think it's so interesting that this is the exact same recipe, exact same measurements, and look at the difference between the two. Let's cut into them and get a side-by-side comparison. This one's still very hot, but it's getting late and I want to finish up filming for you. Okay, here we go. Beautiful, beautiful crumb. It's nice and squishy. Let's cut into the oven baked bread. This one's nice and cool. I can tell that this bread is so much softer than the other one. Although I did rub this one with butter, I haven't rubbed this one with butter yet. Rubbing the sides with butter will certainly soften it, which is the main reason why we do it. But the crumb on this one is beautiful as well. Exact same recipe, oven and bread maker. Hope that was helpful to y'all, and we will see you next time. Bye.